we did for a while a thing of marry, sex, kill, but instead of kill, we said send them to Mars because I mean, likelihood.
But you can't have any fun anymore, can you? God,
I know.
Damn snowflakes on the right.
I know,
They were
I
always
know.
saying they were on the left, but they're on the right actually.
Projection. That's what they do.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday Roast. I hope you're all very well today. We have two wonderful guests with us once again. Marina, can you tell us a little bit about yourself for anyone who, I don't know, is living under a massive rock?
Sure can. So I'm Marina Purkiss. A lot of people know me from Twitter, where I spend a lot of time just trying to hold the government to account, just drawing people's attention to going on, the hypocrisy, sometimes the humour through it all as well. So you can find me there at Marina Purkiss. And I'm going to plug The Trawl. The Trawl is my podcast. So you've got The Rest is Politics for, your insight. You've got news agents for your analysis. And The Trawl is like a lighter alternative when you need someone just to talk about it in a way that reflects what you're thinking, which normally, because of the bin fire that is UK politics, isn't good.
Wonderful. The Trawl is amazing. And who do you do The Trawl with?
I do The Trawl with the amazing Gemma Forte. Again, another political commentator, and she's just a superb human.
I also spend a lot of time on Twitter. My name is Jennifer Cassidy. I am a departmental lecturer in diplomatic studies here at the University of Oxford. I've been here 12 years. I specialise in the research of artificial intelligence, the foreign policy of Silicon Valley, social media's effects on politics. And that's what I did my PhD in. But this was pre-Trump using Twitter. So we were just hoping that someone was going to use Twitter before my final Viva. And then 6 months before, I was the only one who was kind of being like, yeah, keep tweeting. And because he was just a walking, breathing pieces. And then I researched on how diplomats use social media during times of political crisis. And my actual main case study was the Ukraine, which was 2013, though 2014. And the day before my Viva, Trump was treating North Korea, saying "little rocket man," and there was in our family WhatsApp group, my dad just messaged saying, "Look, we could all be dead in 24 hours, but we just need him to keep tweeting for 12 hours, and you have got this." And I was like, "Yeah, that's it. That is some family, support right there." So yeah, I judge myself to my own name on it. It was made many years ago. I know I could change it, but it's at Oxford Diplomat. And yes, I also spent a lot of time trying to hold the British government to account. Every day I get asked, "Why are you commenting on this?" And I'm like, because I live here, pay taxes here, teach UK students here, and vote here. I don't know. Why are you commenting? So, yeah.
My co-host Alex, can you tell us a bit about yourself for anyone who's new to the show?
Hi, I'm Alex, also known as Political X. I run my own YouTube channel, and I'm a historian, and I do a little bit of commentary on politics. And my magnificent co-host, Max.
My name is Max. I run the Robespierre channel, where I talk about British politics and Brexit in particular.
Well, usually we go for that topic of how's Brexit going. However, I'm going to throw a curveball, go to Marina first. How did it feel calling Jacob Rees-Mogg a liar to his face?
You think you know better than the British people?
I think you lied to people and they believed you.
I think the British people are more intelligent than that. The British people weighed up Brexit.
Are you telling me they should have known to know you were a liar?
It was satisfying, but not satisfying enough. There was so much more that I had to say to him, and 9 minutes is just, I had so many things, so many punches I wanted to land on him, which is probably why I carried on even when they were going into the break and
into the weather.
my co-partner, my podcast co-partner Gemma Forte said it sounded like they were dragging you out, because I just kept going. But he is a slippery eel of a man, and because I was brought in to talk about culture wars. They thought I was going to be talking about Roald Dahl. I was like, I'm absolutely not doing that for 9 minutes. But it was great, but I still think back and I'm like, gosh, you should have said this, you should have said that. Got caught up in some of the detail, but what can you do? Did my best.
You did a great job. Can I ask, what did you get to meet him before or after the show?
So there was about a minute. No. Oh, and by the way, the green room at GB News is a cesspit. It's basically, I looked up, I saw it was Nigel Farage was in the office. I saw Dan Wootton, Amanda Patel, that freak priest dude. Like, they were all there, and I'm just like, get me out. I'm like just staring down at my phone, like, don't look up. Every time you look up, you see another shill. Like, just don't look up.
It's a circle of hell.
Circle of hell. And then I was brought in to the studio where Jacob Rees-Mogg was, and it's a strange studio because there's not a single cameraman or woman. It's just all mechanical, basically, like automatic. And I said to him, there's no camera crew here. He said, no. I said, what happens if I launch across the desk and throttle you? And he was like, well, we won't be doing that, will we? But I was fuming. Like, I was so angry with him. I still am. And in fact, breaking news here first, exclusive, they asked me to go back on with him yesterday to talk about the fact that he obviously is positioning Boris Johnson as a completely innocent man, and the Partygate inquiry is a kangaroo court. And again, I would love to talk to him about that, but I can't and won't do GB News again.
Don't blame you. Did they drag you out?
No, they didn't drag me out. No, it was fine, civil, but I've never been somewhere where you normally get sort of accompanied out, taken to your car. I was just like left. I was like, oh God.
Sorry, I'm laughing in support.
Oh no, it's fine. But I feel like everyone hated me in there.
Everyone loved you outside of it. Everyone was like, yes.
Oh, bless you.
Say more. Yeah, it was wonderful. Like, that man. Just.
I know you don't want to go back on, and you said on the show you don't want to go back on, but I think many people would like to see you back on it if you
round two.
I would respect you if you do reconsider, because they need people to challenge them. The head of the Reform UK party went on. Rejoin EU party. Sorry, sorry, Alex. Was on, and he's going to kill me.
That's quite the switch.
Was on, and he stood up to them.
I can't because of who backs it. I can't because of I don't want to give them validation. I don't want to drive viewers to their show. Like, there's all sorts of reasons that it doesn't sit right with me. I would happily debate Jacob Rees-Mogg outside of GB News.
We brought this up with Gemma as well, and we're going to segue beautifully to Jennifer on this, because Gemma also called Richard Tice a liar repeatedly, which was just beautiful, and even he seemed discombobulated. Beautiful word. The thing I also noticed, like what you said there as well, Marina, was he was expecting you to talk about Roald Dahl and the culture wars. It was really interesting. You outed him, and it was almost like his brain couldn't compute. Like, he really seemed to struggle. He started rattling on about Roald Dahl's book when you literally just insulted him, which was just deranged. And again, this also beautifully links in. Jennifer, first of all, do you think any of those lumbering knuckleheads would be able to get into Oxford if you were the person in charge to select them? So Jacob Rees-Mogg did history. I think Boris did PPE. Cameron did PPE.
No, he did classics.
Oh, he did classics. Yeah, because he compared himself to that Roman dictator, didn't he?
Yeah. A lot of them did PPE, and as I said, I taught PPE for 6 years, and I mentioned that I believe it's the Financial Times, but they wrote the article saying the course that ruined the country. Brilliant article, recommended for every student. Give it to every student on the first day. Welcome everyone. Hope you're settling in. Here is an article, and no one here is turning out like this. I will refuse to allow my student, because there's 40 different colleges. I'm not going to go around naming certain colleges that have produced the most prime ministers, but there's certain colleges, but that was not the college that I teach at. But like, I only have only 5 rules, and I think they think I'm like an ogre before they meet me. Just like, hand your essay in on time, this, I won't correct it if it's this, blah, blah, blah. But the 5th rule is, it just says ego. I have no room for ego in this tutorial room. I have no room for ego in this lecture room. If you are severely attached to your ego, please leave it at the door and you can pick it up on the way out. But it will not be taking place in this classroom.
I have a question related to that. Do narcissists know that they're narcissists? Does Boris Johnson know that he's a narcissist? Does Jacob Rees-Mogg know?
Well, don't they say narcissists don't if you ask yourself the question, isn't it? If you ask yourself the question, and am I a narcissist?
Then you're not.
You most likely are not the narcissist, because you're
Mm.
even reflecting on the fact a narcissist would never be like, am I the narcissist? But most of the time they truly, that's the, again, I'm speaking like I'm some kind of psychology like major, like but most of the time I think that the really worrisome part is that they truly believe, like these true like as in personality disordered, like diagnosed personality disordered narcissists, and they know they're manipulating to a certain extent, but it's not.
They definitely don't have the ability to empathize, which is something you get all the way
Yeah.
There's a book which is, I've forgotten who's written it now, but it's about people, particularly men, who go to those sort of public schools and how they have sort of the emotion like crushed out of them. Was it George Orwell? I think it might have been, who basically the other boys found out that he liked butterflies, and as soon as they found that out about him, they absolutely annihilated him as a result. And that was anything. You couldn't show any weakness, you couldn't show any sensitivity. It was been beaten out of you in those places. So which is there is some thinking behind this, which is why we get people who come from that sort of public school background, which are sort of compassion-free zones, because they were sort of conditioned to be that way.
Alongside like the emotional aspect, one aspect of, because a lot of them went to the public schools, as you call them here, and then go on to either this university or the other, but one of the things that I really do notice is, because we have the tutorial system, it is, you have to write a 2,500 word essay every single week for 2 classes. And so that didn't happen in my undergrad. Like I might write 2,500 words like once every like 3 weeks for a class. And you have to then go into the tutorial and defend it, usually one-on-one with the lecturer.
Mm.
Now, there's no way any human can keep this up for 8 weeks and know exactly, while just maintaining any kind of social life, or just like being a healthy human being. So you actually have to, one of the skills that you learn in the tutorials is the ability to waffle, or the ability to go back and forth with experts on like really high topics without actually knowing too much about it. And you do that after 3 years, like 3 years, every single week, 2 tutorials on 2 separate topics, writing the essays, and then going in and having to defend it. That's why they can just, like, sometimes exactly. I look at,
point. I was going to say, I've said the same thing before about the debating societies, that so many of these people, because they are taught to argue the thing they don't believe in with such conviction, and then they carry it through into life, which is that, I mean, it's a skill, but it's also it's a deception skill.
Yeah, so it really, like, there's that. I sometimes look at, I've said it so many times about, God, so many Tory prime ministers after the biggest, scandals. I've said to people, I don't know how, when the chamber's packed and like all the cameras on and we're all waiting like to comment or something, I'm like, how on earth are these people walking to the podium? I would just run away. I'd be on a flight to Mongolia. You'd never see me again. I wouldn't be able to stand up in front of everyone and make a defense and lie or do it. But they're so used to it. It's nothing to them.
This is the problem, because people like you and I wouldn't be able to do it, and we wouldn't necessarily even put ourselves forward for that role. Even Chris Bryant, I think Chris Bryant was actually asked, would you stand as a Labour leader? No, I think Chris Bryant is actually a very impressive Labour politician, too. And the fact that he's like, oh gosh, no, not for me, is so symptomatic of the problem. You know what I mean? So symptomatic of the issue, that well, people who are most deserving of leadership positions won't put themselves forward for it, and the ones that aren't think they're absolutely like perfect for the role, and that gets us in the pickle that we. It's the same thing about loud voices, isn't it? Like, my husband's an introvert. He's so reflective. He's so analytical, and yet he never really like truly believes like in himself. Like, it's always the ones that are self-reflective and stuff that don't put themselves forward for the big stuff. So I've just sort of not smashed my husband there a little bit, but
No, it's true. It is, and it's the same. And you can see it developing within the universities, and I feel really bad now. I don't know the author of this book, but it's called Chums. The author went to Oxford, and he was the editor of the Churro, the magazine here. So he do you have the name?
Simon Cooper.
Simon Cooper, yeah.
Cooper, yeah.
Yeah, so I read it last year, but it's and I believe that the subtitle is how the Oxford Union, how a tiny cast of Oxford Tories took over the UK. Yeah, and so it basically is saying like it's not the Oxford University that created Brexit, it's the Oxford Union, and it's a phenomenal book, and it looks at, he was there during Johnson's time, Gove's time, and he looks at Johnson running for president of the Union and failing first. It's the exact same thing as what happened in his prime ministership. Then he got it again, and everyone on his slate in the Oxford Union was everyone who was his in his cabinet. So it's just another extension. It's a frat house. It's a frat house. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. So, and that's why they're standing up there, using all the skills they learned in the tutorials, with all the people around them that were, in the tutorials with them, or in the Oxford Union with them.
Can I just say something? About that, just to interrupt you for a second. Yeah, I was watching PMQs this week, or watching part of it, and I was really disheartened by the theatre. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be much better? Maybe it wouldn't be very theatrical, it wouldn't be very interesting to watch, but wouldn't it have been better if Keir Starmer stood up, asked a question, and Rishi Sunak or whoever was opposite or filling in for the Prime Minister that day would say, yeah, that's an interesting question. Here is the answer.
Yeah.
Like as if, if you were, in a meeting and you asked your boss, okay, how are we going to achieve this goal or whatever? And they actually answered the question. I'm not saying I understand politics is about, dodging and whatever, but while it would make it'd make pre-MQs pretty boring, but wouldn't we be better off with something like that?
Yeah. What is the purpose of it in its current state?
Yeah, there is no
apart from it being a clown show. I don't understand the purpose of it, and it's really descended into just point scoring and coming back with some sort of dig against Corbyn or something, or some Captain Hindsight. It's sound bites. We've got a government by soundbite at the moment.
Yeah, and it's always been like that historically. Part of the sort of philosophy of Parliament, from my understanding, which is essentially you make sure there's someone holding you accountable. You're not just sat there having people all agree with you. And also the idea is, if you mess up, we've got an instant replacement that's been analysing all your work and figuring out all your faults. That would be the sort of philosophical idea behind it. I'm not saying it works. It clearly doesn't. I don't think it's ever really worked, because how do you force someone to give you an answer?
Alex, it's even worse now. I don't
think
it's ever been good, personally. I think
we've got a Home Secretary that just last week said an outright lie. She said that so in terms of the migration applications and the amount that we processed first time around had dropped, so the backlog had dropped by 17,000. Outright lie. Yvette Cooper stood up, said as much, corrected it. The Speaker gave Suella Braverman the opportunity to correct the record, and she shook her head
when she said the asylum initial decision backlog is down 17,000. Now, the asylum initial decision backlog is clearly defined by the Home Office as the total backlog of initial decisions before and after June of last year, and the Home Office figures show that it has gone up from 132,000 to 137,000 for main applicants since the beginning of December, and it has gone up from 160,000 to 172,000 for all applicants in the first quarter of this year. On either measure, that backlog is up and not down. I raised this as a point of order on Monday, and the Home Secretary refused to correct the record then. I have written to the Home Secretary this morning, but still heard nothing back. And the Ministerial Code requires that ministers give accurate and truthful information to Parliament, correcting any inadvertent error at the earliest opportunity. I know the Home Secretary has a history of breaching the Ministerial Code. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, would you agree that facts matter, that it is not acceptable for ministers to fail to correct the record if they have given inaccurate information to Parliament? And have you heard from the Home Secretary about her intention to come and correct the record?
Well, I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her point of order. As has been said before, and I think this was said when she raised the point of order yesterday, it's obviously not for the Chair to adjudicate in cases of differing interpretations of statistics. That said, if a minister has made a mistake in the House, I would, of course, expect them to correct it. The Right Honourable Lady has put her perspective on the record. Ministers will have heard it, and I'm sure the Home Secretary will reflect on whether a correction is required in this case.
Now, what's the point? What's the point?
No, it's a waste of time. I've covered it on my channel a number of times, where the Speaker stands up and says, would you like to correct the record? No response. Well, you know, we can't really debate. We can debate the figures, but we can't. Yeah. No, it's not a debate. Either the numbers went up or the numbers went down.
An interpretation, no.
And Suella Braverman didn't stand up and say, no, your data is wrong and this is the data I'm using. No, there wasn't a debate. It was like, I'm not actually going to answer the question.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
Move on.
But there's another problem with these flaccid speakers. Like they do nothing. They're absolutely useless.
The only time I ever feel that you actually get somewhere, and it's not always, the general election, when they're on TV and they're having to be really held to account. But there are failures. I am fuming with the BBC. Boris lied about Russian interference twice. She allowed Boris to get away with Russian interference. The person pulled him up and said, why haven't you released the report? And he goes out and says, I've seen nothing in the report that suggests there's Russian interference. The report comes out and it says there's Russian interference. But it's worse than that, because you've actively avoided going into further detail. And in the end, I did a video on it, and in the end, I had to go and I went off and read the US Senate report, the Mueller report, watched a bit on CNN and a bit with Hillary Clinton, and got more out of that about the state of Russian interference over in the UK from America than I did from the UK report. And in fact, last week, we had Ben from SMR Radio come on and say it's better to go and read the news in Europe or in the States.
Of course it is. Their analysis of Brexit is also accurate.
Yeah.
Whereas we're
because they don't have to sell anything.
Yeah. And then have you seen, sorry, just on the topic of our gutter press, Daily Mail, it's got a new journo in town.
Shock.
It is going to be exactly what I think. Hi folks, Boris Johnson here. I am thrilled to be asked to contribute a column to the Daily Mail. It is going to be completely unexpurgated stuff. I may even have to cover politics, but I'll obviously try to do that as little as possible, unless I absolutely have to. I'm much looking forward to making my first contribution to those illustrious pages on Saturday. Join me in the Daily Mail on Saturday.
And the video, it's like the 30 seconds trailer for... There's no words, but yet there are all words.
But the advisory body said you shouldn't have actually done this. You're actually in breach of the rules.
He's now in breach of.
But it's only advisory, so it's not going to make any difference.
You know what? I'm so sick of this shit. All of them breach it. Nadine Dorries did the same thing with Talk TV. She didn't give enough notice.
Coming up on tonight's programme, as you were, Sunak's stability extends to the cabinet with the big beefsteak and all cages, but Braverman back at home in the Home Office. Sorry, I've just completely messed up.
At least hers was longer than 30 minutes. He gave them 30 minutes notice. What is the point in having a committee in place that has got no teeth? Like it can't. There are no sanctions.
Or and even when hasn't formally even resigned.
No,
she's still like one job in, one job. She's like, she's
not. So the word on the street is that she's going to potentially delay that till the autumn, because Sunak wanted to get them all out, bish bash bosh, 3 in one day, and then it just like if it was a hammer blow, take it all at once. Where she's going to drag it out.
October.
That's the thing.
The rumor I'm hearing is that it'll be in October when they have the. Is it okay to say National Conservative
Nazi
yeah,
Nazi
conference. Fucking idiots. It says so much, doesn't it? We have segued quite a bit, but I'm going to bring it back because there was a question I was going to bring to Jennifer, which is, how did it feel to utterly destroy Richard Tice?
You recently accused our Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, of hijacking the Brexit issue and claimed that the amount of trade crossing the Irish border was, to use your own words, and I quote, irrelevant. Can I say, as a point of information, there is no such thing as an Irish land border. It is a UK border imposed on the island of Ireland. The Irish border is the sea. If you think it is irrelevant, can you now speak to the social and political implications to the people of Northern Ireland if a hard border is introduced, if you care so at all?
A picture tells 1,000 words, right? Think of a glass jar with 1,000 Smarties in it.
I was going to note your analogy, which was horrific, by the way.
Oh, hang on. 1,000 Smarties. Those Smarties represent all of the trade that goes across all the 28 countries in Europe. Okay? The trade that goes across that Irish border is between 1 and 2 Smarties. It is a tiny, tiny amount.
How dare you? This is not about economics. I've asked you about the social and political implications for the people of Northern Ireland if a hard border is introduced.
It's not going to be introduced because everybody has said it's not going to be.
When you say everyone's not said it's going to be, that's not what Jean-Claude Juncker has said. He said there has to be. We can't just have animals coming across the border without being checked.
I'm glad you know better than the people of Northern Ireland, the politicians of the Republic of Ireland. And
everybody has said they're not going to impose a hard border.
The head of the police force in Northern Ireland says he worries this could be a trigger for violence. Is he part of a Remain conspiracy as well?
I don't... Look, the reality is...
Well, you know more about policing in Northern Ireland than the head of the police.
No, of course I don't. But there is no reason for that to be the case.
So when Assistant Chief Constable Barbara Gray, who heads up the counter-terrorism unit in Northern Ireland, says we predict that a 6 to 12-month period, if there's a no-deal Brexit, there could be an upsurge in violence. That doesn't worry you at all?
Look, of course, everybody should be worried if,
You don't sound very worried. You just made an analogy about Smarties, and we're talking about the return of violence.
I used an economic point.
But we're not talking economics. That's what
let's go back.
Let's talk about violence. Before I go back to the audience, let's deal with the violence point. Then we have to move.
No one wants violence. Let's be very clear.
Yes.
But let's go back.
People are warning of violence, Richard. What do you say to them?
Oh God, many moons ago when I came, it just came from my office is right opposite the union. And to be honest, I actually did not even know too much about him other than like a few articles I'd read being like, this guy seems like pretty much an idiot. And it just like a small background into the Brexit scenario was that I kept quiet when people say to me, "Oh, you're interfering in UK politics." I'm like, "Oh my God, it's almost like I've lived here for 15 years." So shocking. And also, even if I didn't live here, I'm like, I lecture on politics. I didn't become a lecturer on politics not to have an opinion on politics. Like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, so like that alone. But when the referendum came about, I actually didn't say anything. I was in the middle of my research, so I wasn't doing much. Like, I actually didn't do any public tweeting or saying something, because I actually, and this might be controversial, but like regarding the Leave and Remain, but of course I was Remain. But I do believe that every country has a right to decide whether they want to be in a regional bloc or not. Like, that's why Article 16 exists, be it like ASEAN, CARICOM, the Arab League, the EU. It doesn't matter. Every country has a right to decide. But there's leaving, and then there is leaving. So there's like leaving. Bye, guys. Thank you for having us. We're going to have to like make trade agreements. Let's do this. We've got a border issue. Let's, get the best for our country. And then there's like guerrilla warfare leaving, what we saw, like literally taking everyone out, like the most unnecessary way. Of course, I didn't in no way wanted to, like, I was absolutely gutted when I saw that it was leave. But when the issue of the border came up, I was like, okay, now you have me. Now I will be publicly speaking, because my grandmother lives up like right on the border. My mother grew up on the border during the Troubles. like they still remember, like, you know, like putting the couches up against windows, you know, for bombs. So it's like, and for my grandmother, yeah, she wasn't alive then, but her family had a tailor shop. Her father had a tailor shop, and her siblings were, of course, Irish family, like 11 siblings, but some of them were alive during the 1916 rising. And my great grandfather was the last person to dress Padraig Pearse before he was executed. So their tailor shop was blown up in the 1916 rising, and then they moved to what would become the border. Like, talk about, like, so she saw all of that. Yeah, she saw the Troubles, then saw the Good Friday Agreement, the removal of the border, and she just celebrated her 93rd birthday. I had it up on Twitter. She was like, massive glass of gin. Like, she's going to outlive us all. She's amazing. And she was just like, she's like, we basically always say to her, you're going to outlive us all. But she said about Brexit, may the good Lord take me before a hard border comes in. She's like, I do not want to be, like, the fact that I was like, this woman is going to see a hard border come back in, like, inches from her. So that's how I got, like, really, really into it. But then, so I was just like, it was so personal regarding the ties thing. And I had just given, like, a full lecture, as I said, to politics, economics and philosophy students. And he tried to, this is what set me off. When he tried to explain to me economics through a jar of Smarties, I was like, how I didn't go, like, as you said yourself, go for a lunge. Like, how I didn't just jump up on stage. It's like, excuse me? Like, how patronizing. And then my childhood friend is beside me. If you watch the video, she's like, she's my childhood friend since I was 10, like, in Ireland, but she lives in London. She's like, oh, here she goes again. You can see her, like, oh, Jesus, yeah, this is Jennifer. Oh, she's off. You can just see her putting her head down. It's like, she knows.
Yeah, but it was this thing of, like, Brexiteers in England who didn't know anything about Northern Ireland, didn't know anything about Ireland. Like, and as an Irishman, I was pretty upset when I was hearing Brexiteers, like, saying, oh, we'll sort that out after. Like, do you not understand the importance of the Good Friday Agreement? Of course, Dominic Raab had never even read it, and when he was challenged, he was like, yeah, I refer to it from time to time.
Well, it's
35 pages.
Could I just ask you, since you had such a critical role as the Brexit Secretary, I presume that in fact you had read the Belfast Agreement. Please don't line up behind the Immigration Minister and tell us that you haven't read the agreement.
I haven't sit down and started at the beginning and gone through it, but of course at various points in the negotiations, when issues have been raised, it has been an important opportunity to delve in to the different aspects very carefully.
So which aspects of so you haven't read the Belfast Agreement in its entirety?
I haven't sat down and gone from, I've used it as a reference tool to make sure that I understood and could satisfy and reassure myself that in relation to the commitments that were made on both sides in relation to the joint report in December, which was the basis of what we were going to do on the backstop, that we're not impinging on anything required by the Belfast agreement, and also to make sure more broadly, in the positive sense, that what we're doing can promote peace, stability, notwithstanding what I recognise is a difficult set of questions for the people and the communities in Northern Ireland.
So you're confirming that you haven't read the Belfast Agreement, you were the Brexit Secretary, the backstop, the arrangement with Ireland.
I'm answering all your questions to the best of my ability, and I'm doing it honestly. So it's not like a novel, you sit down and say, do you know what, over the holidays this is a cracking read, but it is an absolutely vital constitutional document, and I consulted it at every moment where, either as of my own initiative or whether as a result of advice of officials, an issue was raised to satisfy myself that we would never do anything, not only to undermine the letter, but also the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement, or indeed the political stability that I'm sure in good faith we all want to preserve.
Good. And could you just confirm, for the record, that you did read the provisions in the agreement which referred to a border poll?
I am familiar with those. I don't have a copy of it in front of me if you want to test me on the detail, but I am familiar with those.
Yes, and
we're running short of time.
We're running short of time. Thank you.
My actual claim to fame, if I may say so, it is that I was the one who found that video.
Oh,
of him. Yeah. That like how like so he's my arch nemesis. He doesn't know he's my arch nemesis. Like he's never met me, but he is my arch nemesis. And yeah. Just will not care in the slightest. But I will care that he is my arch nemesis. But when I saw that clip, I was like, oh no. This has to be, as I said, because I work in AI, I was like, this is a deep fake, or like there's absolutely no way this is and like I'm looking basically looking at where his college was. Like he was schooled in human rights law. I was like, so I did all the checks before I treated this. I was like, okay, I can't be like, he didn't read the Good Friday. You negotiated a 584-page document, but you didn't read like a 34-page, two of which are the front and back covers, 2 pages. And so when I found out it was true, I was like, oh, here we go. And then I just, and so like, if you just Google my name and Dominic Raab, I was like, I have never let up on it. Like I have just like anytime.
But he wasn't some backbencher. He was the Brexit.
I was like, this
Brexit
is the lead
minister.
lead negotiator. I was like, he negotiated as I said, the 584 pages. Didn't read the only document, which was the cause of contention, which then dragged the Brexit deal and negotiations out for years. Allowed all of the Republic of Ireland's money to all our resources, diplomatic agenda setting, our time, along with all the other EU countries that we had to waste. So that was one of my, like, I'm getting frustrated and heated now, but that was one of my big annoyances when the Conservatives were giving out about the EU, say the EU are stalling or the EU aren't giving them enough concessions, like, and Ireland being in the EU, like adding in that. I'm just like...
Great opportunity for me to be clear that the threat to the Good Friday Agreement in the as it's reflected in the Northern Ireland Protocol has come from the EU's politicisation of the issue, and to be clear on how that's happened and why that's happened. Our commitment to the Good Friday Agreement and to avoid any extra infrastructure at the border between the north and the south is absolute. We've made that, and I've had conversations well before the issue of the internal market bill has come up on the Hill with Senate and House leaders and figures. The UK action here is defensive in relation to what the EU is doing. It is precautionary, we haven't done any of this yet, and it is proportionate. But what we can't have is, and this is contrary to the Northern Ireland Protocol and of course a risk to the Good Friday Agreement, what we cannot have is the EU seeking to erect a regulatory border down the Irish Sea between Northern Ireland and Britain. I've had really good conversations and I think it's been helpful.
When it comes to Brexiteers, why is it there's this arrogance when it comes to ignorance? Like, yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm sure, like with Richard Tice or Dominic Raab, like what's your take on that?
Because I think, if we look at the cabinet and who ended up being in the cabinet following the 2019 election win, it ended up being that very small pool of people. They had a very small pool of people to choose from after they basically hemorrhaged a load of them, but after they voted against the whip. If you recall, they did the purge of the half-decent Tories. So it's, you're left with a very small pool, and these people were either massively ignorant and thick not to know the repercussions of this, given their positions, or they knew and they were complicit, and they did what Johnson did, and they rode the Brexit wave into Downing Street into power, and that was their way of holding on to it. So I think that's it. I think that you've got people the people that Johnson ended up surrounding himself with are these, his article that he wrote, these deluded and disciplined stooges like the Nadine Dorries. But then you've got the people who are, look at Liz Truss, for example, absolutely without spine, because she saw everything she's talking about now. Oh my goodness, she did an interview for GB News as well. I'm not sure if you've seen it.
Yeah,
that is a person who is. I don't think I know anyone in my life who's like that, who can just ditch all of their morals, all of their principles, even though they know that there's reams of footage out there of them saying what they truly believe, and pursue something that's complete opposite, that will damage people's lives and livelihoods, etc., all in the pursuit of power, status, money, whatever. And I think that's who he ended up surrounding himself with. So you had a mixture of people, basically. None of them good.
It's interesting that you brought up the word narcissism. Well, we have brought up the word narcissism as well. And we brought up Suella Braverman, Teresa Coffey, when she got pulled up about the woman that died from starvation. Like the news anchor who was interviewing her for Sky was almost like that clip from The Simpsons.
Tell you what, sir, from now on you'll be Homer Thompson at Terror Lake. Let's just practice a bit, hmm? When I say, hello, Mr. Thompson, you'll say, hi. Check. Hello, Mr. Thompson. Remember now, your name is Homer Thompson.
I got you.
Hello, Mr. Thompson. Oh, now, when I say hello, Mr. Thompson, and press down on your foot, you smile and nod.
No problem.
Hello, Mr. Thompson.
I think he's talking to you.
You know, we all make mistakes. I know you to be a compassionate woman. I just wanted you to talk to me briefly about Mercy Burguma. And for our viewers, Mercy was a woman who died of starvation in Scotland. Her little baby was found crying next to her. You were asked about it at the time and you didn't want to talk about it. She was an asylum seeker. Having reflected on it, what would you want to say about it?
OK, I haven't actually been asked about this lady before, so I don't know where that's come from. But
you know who I'm talking about.
I think I know the situation, and it's a lady with immigration status that may have changed. This really is a matter for the Home Office to decide what the immigration status is for each individual. I'm conscious that people can also apply for changes to the Home Office if they are struggling with aspects of that, and the Home Office can make that change so they can get access to public funds. I'm afraid I don't know the individual details of this lady.
I understand that, but as I said, I know you as a compassionate woman. This woman starved to death with her baby next to her.
Well, I don't know the exact ins and outs. I know it happened in Glasgow fairly recently. But really, the Home Office is the person who decides on whether or not
as a human
we
being,
can do that.
What sort of society are we when a woman starves to death?
What I'm trying to say, Kay, is that when people are in very difficult situations like that and they're looking for help from the government, there are ways they can access that help, but I don't know the individual case.
But I'm asking you, I'm giving you the opportunity to be compassionate about it. You know
I've just said people can.
You know enough to know that this woman died and her starving baby was found next to her.
And as I've said, Kay, when people are in very difficult situations, there are ways that the government can help, but it may need an application from them to say, I need some help in this way. So I don't know the exact in there, but the government has been helping millions of people across the country. People without recourse to public funds can apply to the government to get a change in their status so they can get support.
There are procedures in place. And she's literally like stumping her foot, going like empathy. Suella Braverman brought up 154 children gone missing. Where the are they? Where the are those 154 kids? And they pulled her up in committee.
Secretary, you and I both have 2 children. What would you do if one of them went missing?
Well, I would call the police immediately.
This week, there are still 154 unaccompanied asylum-seeking children still missing who were in a Home Office hotel. What are you doing to find those children?
Well, we are ensuring we use, in terms of unaccompanied asylum-seeking hotels, unaccompanied asylum-seeking children in hotels. We are using hotels to accommodate them because of an unprecedented increase. Our first preference is to ensure that, and I'm going to use a term you ask, obviously with of course due respect to the children, but our first choice, by far the best measure, is to accommodate UASCs in through the local authority in foster care. And we have it's been incredibly difficult to identify sufficient places for those children. However, we were able to get that number down to, let me just get sure that I've got the right.
According to the parliamentary answer I had, it's 154 that remain missing.
Yeah, right. Again, you asked me about this, I think, at the last session. And this is obviously an incredibly serious issue. We've worked very intensively, and we've now got that number down to 0. There are no UASCs accommodated in hotels following an intensive focus led by the Home Office to ensure that all of those children found appropriate foster care in local authorities. I'm very grateful to the local authorities who stepped forward.
With respect, Home Secretary, that's not what I asked. I'm glad that there are no unaccompanied children being kept in hotels, because none of them should be in the first place. It's entirely inappropriate that they should be housed in such a way. What I asked is, what are you doing to find the 154 children still unaccounted for?
So any child going missing is extremely serious, and that's why we work very closely, if that case arises, with local authorities and the police to operate a very robust system of missing persons protocols to ensure that the appropriate efforts are put into place to identify where they might be.
Are you aware of the names, the dates of birth of these children that are still missing?
No, I don't know. These would be operational matters for the police. It's not for me to intervene into specific details of cases.
As the Home Secretary,
to do with
your
missing
department
persons.
put these children from where they went missing. I'm asking you if it was your child that had gone missing, as it were, if it were mine, as it were, when a child I'd never met in my neighbourhood went missing. The entire neighbourhood was out looking for them. Who is looking for these 154 missing children?
Yeah, well, what I would say is we have actually no power to detain unaccompanied asylum-seeking children in these hotels.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're suggesting, are you suggesting that we detain them in more secure accommodation?
I'm suggesting that you care when 154 of them go missing and have not yet been found.
With respect, it is incredibly difficult generally when it comes to missing persons, if you speak to the police, to trace them. It is incredibly challenging to find someone who does not want to be found.
How do you know
but however, we take this issue very seriously. When children who are in the UASC category are notified as having gone missing, we work with the police. Sometimes they are located and they are traced, but they are there is an intensive and quite extensive package of social work support, local authority support, support workers who are specially trained to look after UASCs, who provide the activities and the well-being support that's necessary to protect, to safeguard this particularly vulnerable cohort of people.
You said in your answer that some of them may not want to be found. Is that because they're afraid of being sent to Rwanda, or because they're in the hands of traffickers?
You're asking me a hypothetical question that I just simply don't have the answer to.
You don't know who these children are. You don't know why they've gone missing, and you don't know where they are.
We've also got to be really honest about the children, the profile of the children we're dealing with. The vast majority of children are 16 or 17 years old. If they've come here unaccompanied, many of them will. We also get the situation where many adults claim to be children, illegitimately so. 50% of age assessment cases are resolved in the Home Office's favour, i.e. they are actually adults. Let me just give you the profile. We're dealing here with largely 16 to 17-year-old children. They are children. We owe them legal duties. They are, as I say, largely, and as of today, the ones in our care are housed in foster care. That is by far the best form of accommodation to safeguard their needs and their vulnerabilities and to support them. But of those children who have gone missing because they were previously in hotels, there is, of course, a multi-agency missing persons protocol which is mobilised with the police and local authorities to do everything possible to establish their whereabouts.
How long will you keep looking for them?
You'd have to ask the police unless you know, but that is a missing persons protocol which the police apply, and they have to take a judgment based on the intelligence and the facts of a particular case.
It's going to be very difficult to know, isn't it, if they're in the hands of traffickers or if they're running scared of being sent to Rwanda, when you'll actually find them, isn't it?
The Home Office's position is that if you are a UASC and you are in the care of the Home Office, you're encouraged to remain within the accommodation that's being provided and not to run away. You are provided with all of the resources and the services to which you're entitled: schooling, mental health, other well-being support. There is, as I say, an extensive and a package of which I'm very proud, because we've worked hard to build that package to ensure that UASs are properly supported. And running away is something that I wouldn't encourage or condone.
Well, for children in those circumstances, people in the sector have said that your Rwanda plan has caused such fear in those young people that that's why they're disappearing.
If you want to talk about Rwanda, I mean, the point of Rwanda is a deterrent. We want to stop people coming here on boats in the first place. We want to stop people making this illegal journey in the first place. We want to stop the people smuggling gangs exploiting vulnerable people. We want to stop them putting children on their unseaworthy vessels, travelling late at night without a life jacket, in the vain hope of getting to a life in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I know. It's shocking. And it got skipped over the news because Boris basically run roughshod over everything.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that, but it's the sort of thing that people need to see, because these are the people, like Therese Coffey was in charge of, work and pensions, for goodness sake, health at one point. Sola Braverman in charge of home security. Like, these people should be nowhere near those positions where people's welfare is at stake, where a degree of compassion would be handy, and they are completely without it. It's actually frightening that I really do think they see, and if you look at some of the language again, to quote Gary Lineker, the 1930s Germany and 1940s Germany, the language from there. They do that on purpose. I genuinely think that they think the us plebs are beneath them. We are subhuman. That's how I think they think of us.
When it comes to the asylum seekers, I think there's a genuine attempt to maintain this as an issue. So, like, okay, we could actually invest the resources necessary to bring down the numbers of asylum seekers. But if we did that, then we'd lose this as an argument against the other side. So we don't fix the problem, because if we fix the problem, then what do we have left? Because we can't run on the economy, we can't run on the NHS, we can't run on anything else. Sorry, Marina.
On that though, which is really interesting, because you're right, bang on, because the illegal migration bill that they are trying to push through, it hit the headlines a couple of weeks ago that it was going to cost £6 billion over 2 years, right? Mm-hmm. But then if you actually do the calculations based on this, £7 million that we're spending per day at the moment, apparently, which is because of a failure of the Home Office putting people in hotels, £7 million a day. If you actually times that by 365 times 2, it wasn't even as much as 6 billion. Yep. So the cure isn't even it's not better than the problem.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know, and didn't she say in Parliament that Suella Braverman said, "Oh, I haven't done the calculation, haven't estimated the cost," when she was asked about the bill.
Yeah, and then everyone's like, going to. Yeah, and she said they're not going to. Basically, it's like, until I get into it, I'm not going to be able to tell you how much it's going to cost. These bastards never did anything.
Know that, like a parent to a child. Oh, you don't worry your pretty little heads about that. Citizens, we'll do that. And it's the just coming back to the point on the children missing, and you're right to 100% right to get so frustrated and angry about it, because that shows obviously that you're human. But what I picked up on there when because I haven't heard it too, because I missed it because of the whole Johnson thing, taking over the news. But those qualifications that you said that she uses, saying, oh well, some of them said they were 16, or X or Y or Z. That's like another key tactic that they use. And Jacob Rees-Mogg is. I just watched him a whole interview on this before this, defending Johnson and Porsche. It's all these about Harriet Harman, all these little things that then if you then go down the rabbit hole with them. Oh, hang on, yeah, but they're 16, but they weren't. Like, how am I here if they're 16, 17, or 18? They were missing. Mm. They're 50 or 50, 60, 7-year-old missing. There's 154 people missing. But you're making all these qualifications, and they always interject. And again, I know I'm bringing it back to the tutorial system. That is a product of it.
Yeah.
Like swerving the argument. But have you thought about that? Catching other people off guard, and then you don't know whether to go down the rabbit hole with them. And if you keep the line with them, they keep the same answer. But I do truly find, and this is just my personal opinion, like I truly despise Jacob Rees-Mogg. I've just said, clearly I'm not coming up as a nice person on this, but
you are. You're a nice person. That's why you hate them.
Dominic Raab is my arch nemesis. I hate.
but it's like
just take out my list. But Suella Braverman really is, for me, she is a very, very scary persona, very scary politician, and Dominic Raab is just very dumb, I do believe. Jacob Rees-Mogg is just a kind of like wind up loyal clock, or like, one of those dolls you wind up and says the same thing to support the leader, and just very inflated view of himself. But Suella Braverman, the statements that have come out, and her refusal again to acknowledge things like this, and just even to speak or answer, she's terrifying.
I don't know if you guys saw the her comments about Caroline Lucas. Caroline Lucas is and she's really like the way she stood across the dispatch box and laughed in almost laugh, and then she realized, oh, actually I have to be more civil.
Spoke with characteristic alarmism, if I may say so. We've become accustomed to her doom-mongering over the years, and I will actually miss it, I have to say, when she leaves this house. And let me take this opportunity to thank her for her years of hard work for her constituents and for the causes about which she's so evidently passionate. But, Mr. Deputy...
Oh my goodness, what a massive hunt. So notice towards the end how she said, I want to congratulate...
Yeah, and was laughing about, and we talked about narcissism, and it got... Again, I am no psychiatrist, and I'm not diagnosing anyone just before anyone starts on comments being like... But that laugh, it's called, the term is called duper's delight. Again, for people who are actually diagnosed with this. This is why she does truly scare me as a politician. That laughter and that kind of glee that she got from, she could see that she was not intimidating, but she could see that she was, ruining someone's moment. This was their, resignation after a great career. She could see that she was pushing them down, and that smile of duper's delight is narcissists truly gain energy from that. They gain, while other people would feel drained from it, she was
energized by suffering.
Yeah, but also, don't forget the plane. She was, it was her dream to see people deported.
I'm stress laughing. Yeah. Sorry, I'm stress laughing. Yeah, that was exactly. Like that is duper's delight. If I forgot about that. Like if you ever hear her, like
she almost makes Roald Dahl characters seem quite reasonable. I mean, let's face it. I mean, she gets called out by a Holocaust survivor and she survives. She loses 100. Imagine if any one of us in an education position had lost one child and we turned around to the parents and went, what do you expect us to do? Have them handcuffed to us?
Yeah, like I'm an assistant dean at one of the colleges. These are all overage. Like these are all of age. Could you imagine? Like, and we're always told that when we act, I think it's one of the best things to do. You act with the thing in mind, well, Your Honor. So if you're ever wondering about a decision to make, think, okay, how are you going to defend this? Why you did the action. This is regarding like with the welfare of students, like well, Your Honor, and along with the empathy and all that. But exactly, could you imagine if like there was like one student lost and they rang up the college? Oh God. They're of age. What are we to do?
Not my problem.
That's just like where I work, my actual full-time gig, which is like a US tech firm. I can't see any of this lot surviving. They're too toxic. They're too it's all me. Like there's no diplomacy. And also I have to say, I do think a lot of them are stupid. I think they know they've got the lingo. They know how to mislead. They know how to massage numbers, but I do think they're stupid.
Yeah.
Who believes that you can close the sea? Poseidon? I don't know.
No, again, my arch nemesis.
Just didn't understand the importance of the Dover-Calais crossing either.
Asked had he gone to Ireland, he said, yes, I have been to Belfast. Sorry, what? Like, yeah.
And also he believes misogyny can happen to both a woman and a man. So such a bright spot.
He's an equal opportunities bigot.
He's actually the worst. He is one of the worst people I have ever.
Okay, right. We're gonna step this up. Right. We should all be celebrating, shouldn't we?
No.
Shouldn't we all have cigars and champagne out? Because Johnson's gone, Brexit's dead, and it's not us even saying that. It's Farage. It's gone. They had the 4-year period. Youth aren't interested. Trump's going to jail because of the Espionage Act. 37 counts.
The height of when Trump was in charge in 2018, so he was elected in 2016, 2018, people were saying it can't get any worse. And I always said never say that because it can always get worse.
Mm-hmm.
But with Johnson gone doesn't mean the Johnson belief, the Johnson way of doing things is gone. You know, the liars and charlatans are still there. Johnson, he was the king of charlatans, but you cut off the head of the Hydra and another one grows up. So another one grows in its place. So you're going to have more people like, because the problem is the media as well. The media just continue to push. Like there was the guy from the Express debating in a sense with a journalist from the Guardian about Johnson, and he kept saying this is revenge for Brexit. This is nothing to do with COVID. It's nothing to do with him lying in Parliament. This is revenge. This is the blob. This is the Remainers trying to get Johnson out, and they have succeeded.
But
So it's a bit like
an admission that because if Brexit was as great as they promised, we wouldn't have to. There'd be no revenge to take. We'd be like, oh, actually, do you know what? You guys were right. This is lovely. Thank you. But it's not like that. Everyone else is a shit show.
But like all the people who I fully agree that like think one should be celebrating with those headlines, except just slight footnote that Trump can actually run a presidential campaign from jail. I have just found out they can. So
Lula.
Yeah, I know. Imagine heads of state ringing the jail, taking that when you're elected head of state. Yes, you accept this call. Yes,
but he can't become president, surely.
I think he can't. I think because it would be a treasonous act. I think that bans you from running for president.
But there is some kind of strange loophole that I heard, and I'm like, this is the thing. These are the loopholes that we think it'll never happen. And his lawyer, I shouldn't even be laughing about this, but his lawyer went on, and one of the best arguments they could make is they were saying 37 felony charges, and they're like, he's arrested, will he have to get a mugshot? And they're like, oh no, he won't have to get a mugshot, everyone knows who he is, so don't worry about that. I was like, is that your best play card here, that he doesn't have to get a mugshot? Like, this is where we're at? Like, we're rejoicing that he doesn't have to get a mug. She's like, oh no. And she thought like, oh, gotcha there. Like, I was like, got what? Like, you didn't win an argument because he doesn't have all those people. And we saw it from the moment the report was published, looking at Johnson. All those people who supported him in the media, who were complicit, who never called him out, who just were worried that in some way that they would, he would target their organization. All the people in the Conservatives, just like we talked about Liz Truss, who just ditched everything they believed in, all in the quest for power. They are all still there. Yeah. The waters have been poisoned, and that sounds dramatic, but it's extremely true. And one of the worst things they've done, and this relates to the Trump as well, and it's what I had mentioned, that Hannah Arendt. I always ruin her second name. My apologies for pronunciations, Arendt. But when she is one of the greatest political philosophers of all time. I'm truly obsessed, and she wrote. She escaped Nazi Germany, moved to the US, but wrote about totalitarianism and populism. And her book is The main book is The Origins of Totalitarianism, and it was written in 1951. And she wrote about fake news before fake news was even a term. And the quote is, "The ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced communist or the ardent Nazi, but the person for whom fact and fiction and truth and falsehood no longer exist." Blows my mind. Like I could literally, we could be here for like 5 days and like, and the next quote, like I quote reams of her. But what they have done, both, you know, this side, that side of the water, and here, and in Hungary, and in many other places, it's not just the extremes. It's when you create this middle group where people are doubting what is true and what is not, and who they can believe, and what, and even if it's a tinge in the back of your head, sometimes I get this like, hang on, I'll have to fact check that. Like looking at that video of Dominic Raab, I think that's a deep fake. Like the fact you have that in the back of your head, and if you have that in your society, where nothing is believed, there's no objective truth, and you're always doubting, that is one of the worst threats to any democratic process. I think so, we can see.
I'll jump in there with Finland. Finland's got one of the lowest rates for this, which is fascinating. And then you look at their education system, and it's fantastic from what I can tell. It's not perfect, wouldn't say that, but it looks like it's higher end. And the things I've been advocating for that we should all be doing are actually things that we're reducing. So if you want to increase IQ, learn a language. That helps.
Yeah.
Have a decent diet, do physical exercise.
They also teach about disinformation.
Yeah. They actively teach about that and how to look for it online. Small classrooms, don't have more than 19 in a class. And I was looking at Labour's policies on education. It's total shit. Like there's nothing in there from that leaked document. And I've said this before, at the present moment, I wouldn't vote for Labour. And I've been a Labour member before. It's not.
Who are you voting for though, Alex?
So in my area, I would vote Green. That's who I'd vote for.
And
you could argue you should go tactical voting, but my area always goes Labour, and it's had Harriet Harman in.
Okay, fair enough.
Which, you know, we could debate over, but I would vote Green as a protest vote, and I like Green policies. Marina, what are your thoughts on Labour?
Oh, I've said I'm more and more disillusioned and disappointed by them, and I hate this, but they will still get my vote because we live in a two-party, essentially, because of first past the post. That's the way it is. If it were not that way, I wouldn't vote for Labour, but it's not that way. So the first objective surely has to be get the Tories out. We can't have another Tory government. This country can't.
But can I say? But I hear the strain in your voice, and like Labour are not exactly helping the situation, are they?
In the Lords, they failed to support Jenny Jones's fatal Baroness Jenny Jones of the Green Party. They failed to support her fatal motion that she tabled in response to the government trying to overturn a house. This was something that was overturned by the House of Lords, trying to use a ministerial decree, which is like a secondary piece of legislation, first time ever to overturn this. And it's basically, it boils down to this: they want to change the interpretation of anything more than minor in terms of disruption when it comes to the public order bill. They want to change anything more than minor to, they want to change the meaning of serious disruption to be anything more than minor. Now, that, because there was no support from the Labour Lords, it's going to pass, right? That means that public order bill that was already authoritarian as hell has just been made even more so. And that to me was shocking. There was just no need for them to not support it. What they came out with in response to that was to say, actually, you know, we don't block in the House of Lords. They're basically trying to say that they are playing by the rules, which is pathetic because this lot don't play by the rules. They rewrite the bloody rules. You can't play with the rule book with these guys. And I'm just so sick of them letting us down, taking us for granted. Every single one of us that voted, that wanted to remain, just leave the door slightly ajar for us in your language. Just don't shut us out completely. All the people that want you to repeal all these shitty authoritarian, cruel, like laws that have been brought in. I hear nothing. I hear nothing on that. All the things that we liked about Labour, that got Keir Starmer elected as leader, he's just thrown one out the window, out the window one by one. And I'm just starting to really be like, you lot are fucking doing my head in. And I will give you my vote to keep the Tories out. But once you are in, I hope it's a coalition. I must say, I hope it's a coalition. So they are held to, they're kept honest to what they have promised.
Yeah,
and there's
that's what I. Yeah.
But it does seem like it. This is. I didn't do much when Brexit came out, but the one thing I said was, if this goes forward, we won't gain democracy. We'll lose it, because all you're left with is the Commons, which is essentially 300 plus people in charge. That's it. Like, the Supreme Court goes out the window because there's no codified constitution. House of Lords is useless, and the head of state is just some sort of weird, important, imaginary figure at the same time, depending on who you speak to.
I know,
and when we were in the EU, you had a codified constitution, you had 2 Supreme Courts, and you had an extra parliament, which was proportional, which meant that actually voting meant something. And yet that's all being thrown out the window. Go on, Jennifer.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I hate to say the phrase "bringing it back to Johnson," but he ran on that very platform that Parliament is all sovereign, and Brexit. We need to get Brexit done, and all we all know all the slogans, but because Parliament needs to maintain its sovereignty, and we are like, this is the beacon of sovereignty, one of the oldest parliaments in the world, etc., etc. The moment the Parliament exercises its sovereignty, it's with its committee, it's deranged. It's blasphemous. It's a kangaroo court. It's a witch hunt. So it's like, I don't know the exact phrase, but it was from the conclusive remarks at the start of the report, but it was brilliantly phrased, and just said he is it's something like he's the master of aftermath rationalization or something.
Yes.
Basically, like another academic way of saying he's just making up facts to fit, or making up stuff to fit what happened. But so he either thinks the Parliament is sovereign, and it's this wonderful beacon thing that he's fought for and ran on every platform around the Conservative law, or it's not, or it's a kangaroo court, it's a witch hunt, it's not fair.
That's classic narcissism again. It's only good when it works when in my favor. Do you think he'd be saying any of that if the bastard had won? Which
no,
he didn't.
he's as we know, a serial liar, and he's always more, what's the phrase, more sinned against than a sinner. Like, he's just, it's always everyone's out to get him. And
I'm going to bring back to the point that I was making with Marina, which is, there's so much power there in Parliament once you're in. That's the thing that always concerns me. And it was that quote, and I paraphrase, absolute power absolutely corrupts. And that's the thing I'm looking at Starmer and going, why does he want that protest bill kept? Because he's going to be, in theory, he's going to be in. And there seems to be a lot of people on Twitter going, it's an authoritarian state, it's an authoritarian state. And as once you're in, and you're not accountable to anyone.
Yeah. I think we've seen that Boris Johnson and his successors have exposed just how vulnerable and weak our political system is to people like that. And there's absolutely, like, you can see how many times can ministerial codes be broken now, daily by a number of people. It makes no difference. The punishment. So if Owen Paterson made God knows how much money from his links to Randox, and yet the suspension was going to be, what was it going to be, like 10 days or something? But the payoff that he got, I'd take a 10-day suspension for that. Yeah, like, do you know, there's no
go right ahead.
Yeah, it's a reward. It's just a broken system that has let awful people just into it, and it just really scares me. It just really scares me that we're seeing this, not just in this country. You see it in the US. You can see it in wherever places that we've seen more right-wing leaders take the helm again, and it just I just want to shake people sometimes, be like, what the fuck are you doing? Why do you think this person is going to help you? Like, what is it they're saying that appeals to you? And just try and understand it. It
comes back to that thing with the migrants. What makes you think that if if they could, they wouldn't treat you any different to a migrant.
Because they've got a Union Jack flag behind them, and that's my country. Like, you know, there's.
But I think they do. I think that, you know, I'd say it's corporate manslaughter, active murder, what they've done, and they couldn't give less of a shit. Like most. So on that cheerful note, we're out.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Tune in next week for another exciting story from the files of Police Squad.